Theory Podcast.
All right. Welcome to Creative Theory Podcast, the show that brings you conversations with visual artists about how they got to where they got, what their day-to-day is like, what their struggles are, thoughts in the art world, and a lot more. Today on the podcast, episode 46, got someone who wears many hats. He's a comic book artist, layout artist, illustrator, who now works as a senior storyboard and concept artist at Riot Games. Jon Lam, welcome on the show.
Hey, happy to be here.
Was that a pretty accurate description of yourself? Do you usually, like when you introduce yourself, do you add more or less of those descriptions?
I just say storyboard artist now, but layout thing was like something I like to keep in the past.
You don't want to go back to it?
No, it was just like, I think it was like one of my first gigs in animation to move over to Vancouver, and like I quickly learned that I did not like it, and then I left it in 4 months. So.
And is it just because, like, a lot of line work, I'm assuming you're looking at boards and translating designs? Which part was not something that clicked with you?
All of it. I'm definitely more of like a character storytelling guy. And like in layout art, you're just kind of like following, certain key art, and then you're drawing the thing in different angles. And that it was not creative at all. So
to the same style. And usually deadlines are super tight too, right?
Deadlines are super tight. Productions, always making sure you're meeting your quotas. That's all I'll say about that. So, I'm glad to be out of that racket.
Nice. So for those people who do follow Jon, they know you've been very active in the world of AI art and fighting that fight. There's even just, last couple of even weeks, but months, there's been a lot of development. And I would imagine for most people who are visual artists, and maybe even not, they've been seeing a lot of conversations, but especially in our world, I think it's pretty relevant. And I do want to get there, but I think I want to start with your background. And in fact, I think it actually will contribute to this conversation, because I think as we talk and learn about your path and what it took to get to where you are, it is years and years effort and time put into it. I think it'll actually likely be a very good case for, maybe not the dangers, but like the arguments that are happening right now around AI art. I think it's all going to be very relevant. So if you don't mind, I think we'll get started there.
Sure. Well, I guess to start, like, when I was growing up, I was all about comic book art, and that was my dream, to be a comic book artist. And, I really worshipped Todd McFarlane and Spawn. I did lots of projects on him in school, maybe too many projects on him. I was quite obsessed. And always dreamed about being a Marvel comic artist one day as well. And, I went to art school for that, got a degree in illustration. And after I graduated from OCAD, it was very hard for me to find a job. And I spent a lot of years actually not being able to get employed. So I was doing lots of, internships, free gigs, and really small paying freelance jobs. And then eventually I went to animation for a year at Sheridan. And then I learned what I needed to from a life drawing teacher called Thurman, who basically kind of unlocked things in my mind where I was able to just finally figure out anatomy in a way that was like beneficial to me. So I took that knowledge and I basically just dropped out that year. And then I got, I advise that to everybody: go to art school for 1 year, learn what you need to, and then bounce. And then I, got a job in animation, doing concept art at ARC for multiple properties, and then just kind of went from there.
There's something, and I've heard that name from that Sheridan instructor. I don't know about yourself. You've been in the industry for a while. I find that, and I also was working in Vancouver, British Columbia for quite a long time. But I've noticed that there's a lot of good artists that came out of Sheridan. I keep mentioning to every artist that I see from Sheridan. There's been a couple on this podcast, but and I've heard that instructor's name. But it's interesting that how that certain environment and then the right people, I suppose, in the end, it really is the right people, not so much the institution that I think make great artists. Like, does that sound correct? Have you seen many people from the same school around in your field?
Oh, for sure. It's kind of scary, actually. Like, you hear Cal Arts, you hear Art Center, but everybody who's Canadian is from Sheridan, which is kind of crazy.
And to me, it is kind of I don't know if you look at that way, but it's a little bit sad or scary that it is a bit of a lottery in that case, that if you knew about it, if you could go to it, you're all of a sudden your chances of potentially, getting the job or leveling up or having that thing click that you're describing, it is really affected by it, because I like to believe, and I want to believe that, you know, if you were going to put in the work, and even if you did online classes or you didn't go to the university, you can do it. And I think that still rings true, but there's certain steps, right? I wouldn't call it a shortcut, but there's certain advances you can take by meeting the right person in the right time in your path or career, education.
Oh, for sure. I feel like, you know, everybody has that one instructor in their lives that kind of just made things click for some reason. You know, and so also sometimes it's just kind of the people who you're surrounded with, right? Everybody has a similar goal. Everyone has like similar vibes, and it's also like, you know, iron sharpening iron. You know, you also feel a bit of like friendly competition, and everyone sees like, oh, this person did this. Oh God, like, I hate that guy. Oh, now I'm gonna do my thing, right? And like in the end, it's all like friendly competition, and then everyone is better for it, right? So I will say like I did spend a long time trying to learn everything on my own, you know, like listening to podcasts, you know, watching lots of YouTube tutorials and all that. And for some reason, something just wasn't clicking, right? And sometimes you just need that person to look over your shoulder and be like, oh, actually, if you think of it this way, maybe it'll help you draw faster, or maybe you'll understand anatomy better, right? And sometimes it's just that one suggestion from that person who can pinpoint your mistakes and then correct you on the spot, right? And then that kind of sticks with you forever.
Yeah. For the longest time, I've really been trying to chase being surrounded by people who are so much better than me to try to get as much of that as possible. And I mean, mostly in career sense, but I guess like I think friends as well. And I feel lucky that those people do exist. But I found it sometimes hard in the animation field, at least where it was like to try to get as many of those people in one room as possible. And maybe around while we're on this topic, as you know, last 2-3 years of the pandemic and working from home, have you found this lack, or is there availability of the right people looking at your work and being able to be there to point you to ways to get better? As you know, we're not in person anymore, and I don't know if that's the only way, but what do you think about this point you're making about someone helping you out while working remote? How have you found that?
I think it's definitely harder to improve, you know, when we're working remote. But I will say that like it really depends on how hard you chase the community, right? There are discords out there where like there are storyboard artists who can kind of share resources with each other, share their work in progresses. When I was working at Blizzard, you know, our team was pretty tight, and you know, we would share stuff with each other all the time, and we would share our favorite movies, favorite films. We would have like movie nights, and you know, we would always show our work in progresses to each other, the director and the supervisor and stuff, and we always jammed on it. So like I think in that way, I definitely learned a lot from my coworkers, but it really depends on the community because I know every company is different.
Yeah, it's so true. And then your friend circle. That's one thing I like to believe, that it's still possible to be able to get any kind of guidance you want, even from a distance. And in some ways, you can actually access artists who you may actually never meet in person, right? So, but you're right. I guess in the end, and potentially, again, another analogy to going to the school, like it's the effort you put into or the questions that you ask, maybe.
Yeah.
I like to believe that it's possible regardless of distance. So it's just me.
No, I think it's possible too. I mean, like, you know, if you pay to go to school but you constantly skip your classes, right? Then it's useless to you, right? So it's the same thing. I mean, I think a large degree of it is like you get what you put in, you know, but you have to ask the right questions. That you have to ask the right questions, and you also have to find the right community of people to help you, right? You don't want to be surrounded by people who, you know, constantly look up to you and like, you know, they can't offer you critiques, only you offer them critiques, right? Then that's a one-way relationship, right? You want to be in a community where you guys can offer each other tips and help each other grow.
For sure. Maybe last question about kind of education in school before we get on to another topic. But I would be curious, since you already mentioned your recommendation for people to do 1 year of school and drop out. If someone is listening right now and they're, you know, maybe about to start pursuing art education, or maybe they're in the middle of it, as a kind of is that the advice, or is there anything else that you could suggest to them having gone through this?
I will say that, you know, definitely put yourself out there, you know, like post on social media. I know it's a little bit difficult with all the scraping stuff going on right now. We'll get into that later, but I will say, like, you know, posting your art on Instagram or social media actually is a way for people to form communities. And I would say like that has actually been one of the strongest art communities I've been in, social media, like Instagram. sorry, I kind of lost track of my train of thought there. But I would just recommend for people to really put themselves out there, open themselves up to critique. Also, study your favorite artists. Really try to break down what you like about them, what they're doing right, and just realize that everybody's learning. So don't be too precious about getting critiqued or trying to be perfect.
Do you have any kind of mind tricks or things that you do to try to be present in social media while try to kind of fight the dopamine rush or the because sometimes it comes with it of like feeling like, oh, now I have to post. Sometimes you see artists saying online, and I think I may have discussed on the podcast before, but people say, hey, sorry, I haven't posted in a while. It's like, why are you apologizing? But do you find a way to be very healthy with it? I don't know if there's advice for that.
Yeah, I guess it's like mindful posting. Not to sound too hippy dippy about it, but before you have that urge to draw or post, you kind of have to ask yourself why you're doing it. Am I drawing for the sake of posting something in a hurry, or am I posting because I actually like what I did and I want to show people? And am I drawing for the joy of it, or am I drawing for those likes and the dopamine rush and the clout, right?
Yeah.
And
I've definitely I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, you're saying.
Yeah, I've definitely been. I feel like I've had to. I'm happy to say I'm much better at it, but there was a little moment I remember where I had to make work and kind of throw it in a folder somewhere on purpose to get rid of the feeling like this is to be uploaded somewhere. And this is like how my brain works, and then maybe I'm more prone to that kind of feel good addiction thing. But I really had to, as you're saying, I guess if the question is I'm making work so I can post it so I can share it, it felt like while there's partly that's a good motivation. I personally want to make artwork so others can experience it. I feel like it's not exactly complete if it's sitting in the dark, but I had to make myself make work and have it not go anywhere to try to get rid of the desire that it's it's only real if it's out there.
That's true, and that is also true. I will say it is only real when it's out there, because I mean you can have the greatest piece on the planet, right? But if you don't share it, then it doesn't exist, and you can't get all the benefits from it, like either connections or some pats on the back, which we all need. All artists crave this. I myself am totally guilty of this. And I will say, like, you have to look at the big picture, right? And the big picture is we're all on social media to build community, and we're also all on social media to be visible, right? And being visible means an easier time being employed, right? So like, let's say like the Inktober thing, right? Like I was totally on the Inktober hype train, and there was a time, I think 2018 or 17, where I was like, okay, this year I'm going to finally do it, right? And like I didn't hit every day, but I busted my ass, and I probably hit like every 2 days. And it changed my career, actually.
Oh, wow.
Like, yeah, it's crazy. And like, there were some days where I didn't want to do it, but I kind of forced myself. And some days where I forced myself to do it, I actually came up with some of the best pieces for some reason. I don't know what it was. Like, I think when you're tired and you're kind of not thinking too hard about it, you kind of just let loose and just let it rip.
Yeah.
And I will say sometimes it's good to just let it rip, and like if people don't like it, fuck it. If people like it, cool, right? Yeah. So I mean, if the end goal is to get more following, get more visibility, so that you can have a better time finding work out there, then I say go for it too. And if you're serving that bigger picture, then you're meeting your goals.
For yourself, do you find good separation, or do you need that separation between artwork that benefits career versus artwork that is just you, I guess? Or do you find that the kind of artwork that you enjoy, as you were saying in the beginning, starting from the comic books, is that the art that you enjoy is always fitting into that realm, so there doesn't need to be a competition or separation?
I think I've definitely started gearing more of my personal work towards more of the work I want to get, right? Like when I was really interested in comics, I posted a lot of comic book pages because I wanted to get more comic work. But then now I'm just posting more storyboards because I'm like completely in love with the process and my profession, I guess. And I do want to push those boundaries and learn more about film and whatnot, and start having conversations with other people about film and learn more from them. So like for me, I'm very like purpose driven when I'm drawing. So I want to be like, I'm thinking about like what do I want to get out of this? Do I want to learn more? Do I want to build connections? or do I just want to come up with a nice piece and have some compliments and then move on, right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
there's time for both. Sometimes I might do a nice ink drawing just because I felt like doing inks, and I didn't really care about serving a higher purpose of showing how cool I can storyboard, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a place for both, and I think maybe everyone should just explore every curiosity they have, right? Like especially after you start getting your foot in the door and you have the profession set, you can start exploring more and having more fun. Because I know, like, for a lot of beginners, if you're doing background art and then you're doing prop art and then you're doing character art and then you're doing like a 3D model, potential employers will be very confused as to what you want to do,
Yeah.
and you might end up being employed for something you don't want to do, which is even worse, right? So, yeah.
I can't remember where that's from, but it's like do the work that you want to work on or something like that. I think there's a
Oh,
quote somewhere out there that it seems so redundant, but it's so true. And I think often makes sense maybe that students would focus on the kind of artwork that they think will hire them, and then eventually realize to make the kind of artwork they'll like to do. And I think both are fair. I think,
yeah,
as you said, first job matters a lot.
that's right.
To what you just said, maybe it kind of poses a question: if you didn't have to work or make a living, how different would this creative pursuit look like?
Um, I think I would still do animatics actually because they are a great proof of concept for short films.
Mm.
And I'm working my way onto working on a short film. Like I aspire to direct, so that's kind of where I'm heading towards. But I also have a lot of stories that I write with my fiance that we would love to put into graphic novels, and I would just love to just sit down and just do comics, all day long as well.
I hope you can make it happen. It's always that's like the most true to heart. So probably is the most interesting kind of work that one can create. I hope that works out. I'm curious. I was looking at your LinkedIn. It seems like on a couple of projects, even right now, it says that you do storyboarding and concept art. So I'm very curious about how that came about and what kind of split do you get, and do you know many other people doing it like that?
I don't know too many other people doing this. It's kind of I've kind of fallen into this weird thing where, like, I storyboard for cinematics, I storyboard for animation, and I also storyboard to help with game mechanics, and I also do some character designs every now and then. So it's a couple of mixed bags, but I think it's just because, as I was growing up, I was kind of interested in multiple things like, character design, turnarounds, comics, and storytelling, and to some degree they're all related. And
Mhm.
sometimes doing character designs will help you inform your storyboards or your comics. So,
Would you say that, and maybe that's what you just said, but maybe I'm reiterating, but like, would you say that the having that background in comic books basically set you up and gave you those basics and the understanding of form to do anything drawing based at this point?
yeah, I'll say like comic books are a phenomenal foundation to have because you understand staging, you understand composition, you understand storytelling, you understand backgrounds, environments, um, you know, drawing multiple people in one scene, people interacting with objects,
Yeah.
just all those things together. And then I would say like learning how to draw comics actually opens up a lot of jobs, right? That's how I ended up getting work in background layout, which was a mistake, but I got that job anyway. Also lends itself to storyboarding and character design. They're all related.
That's awesome. Yeah. I guess you're saying that first job was a mistake, but maybe a worthy mistake put you on the right path, maybe. Yeah.
I say it's a mistake, but sometimes you need to do jobs you don't want to do so that you don't want to do them.
Yeah, I agree.
Right.
I
Yeah.
100%. And then another thing I was like that stood out to me is on your, I guess it's resume, but it said you're co-creator and artist of an IP that you worked on at Skybound. Is that something announced? Unannounced? Can you talk about that? I'm just curious about how that came about and what that experience was, because everyone dreams about creating an IP and making it happen.
Sure. Yeah, I can talk about this. I actually haven't talked about this officially yet, but basically it was a comic that me and my fiance made called Super Punchy Girl.
Hmm.
And at the time when we pitched it to Skybound, we actually got greenlit for it. But we were like very green writers, and we were working with 5 editors. Some of them were Eisner winners at the time to help us write. And it was called Skybound Labs, which was a program where editors help you learn how to write. And we wrote so many drafts and a lot of bad drafts, like I'll say. And like it kind of just got to the point where Like, it just wasn't working out because I think we still had to grow. So
Hmm.
now, like, me and my fiance are definitely more confident as writers. It's been a couple of years since then, and we're still planning on releasing it independently, maybe through Image Comics. But I'm kind of at a place right now where like I feel confident in what we're writing, and I'm still deciding on whether to like hire an artist to draw this or to find some time into drawing this comic. Like I said, I would love to draw this comic, but like with the whole AI thing, it's just been very hard to find time to like outside of work.
Yeah, before we started this, John was telling me how the fighting AI has basically become a part-time job that just takes too much time now.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I need to really pull myself away from it, but then, then you see this article and that article, and then this person saying that person, you're like, oh God, people need to know. And then, yeah,
You're out there educating people and fighting the fight. Is it,
yeah,
would you describe it like that?
yeah, wagging my finger, you know,
You got to tell them.
yeah.
I mean, it is. I guess because it is so new, there's so much. I guess you get so many fascinating and sometimes infuriating comments from so many sites. I think you're posting some pretty good mean ones out there. At least I noticed on your Instagram there's some rough ones.
Yeah. I mean, I've been getting some terrible comments and trolls and every now and then, but like I usually post them to show like really popular talking points that are really easy to debunk, right?
Hmm.
And it's kind of funny because like I feel like no matter how many times I debunk them, there's always someone who like comes out of the woodwork, repeats that talking point as if they were the first person to say it. I'm like, no, I've debunked this for the 50th time, but here's an article.
What you want to do is right now, actually. So maybe for people who haven't been paying attention as much, or I mean, it feels like there's a lot of conversation, and I don't know if there's a singular one. So and maybe they're never maybe just because it's internet. But do you want to talk about a couple of main what are the things that need to be debunked? Are the main things that people need to know about AI art, and maybe why they should watch out for it?
Sure. I mean, a common talking point is like people think that AI thinks the same way that people do, and that's simply not true. Like a lot of neurologists don't even fully understand how the human brain works or how we create creativity. So I wouldn't expect an AI tech specialist to know either. And I also read an article recently, I think from MIT, basically saying that, well, there's only 10 minutes left, basically saying that a lot of neural networks are based on results from studies done from the human brain, and that a lot of specialists who are working on neural networks are also biased, and they gear results towards their findings towards what they found for the human brain. So it's still a lot of studies that are out there that haven't confirmed that neural networks and the human brain work the same way. So people confirming that they know for a fact is not true.
Hmm.
And
Um,
I
yeah.
guess I guess something else is that people think that like people don't believe that AI is unethical currently.
Hmm.
And usually people who are telling us this are people who are not artists, like people who've just started doing AI art for like a month or two and all of a sudden are telling artists what art is, and you
Hmm.
know and like these people aren't as experienced as we are, and we know where all this training data comes from, right? It comes from the internet. It's been scraped. 5.6 billion pieces of data and image information have been scraped from the internet, and
Hmm.
a lot of it, like a lot of the art that we're seeing from AI programs, is coming directly from all of us. Every artist who's ever posted online ever.
And and I guess to that point, do you see like the people who are maybe are aware of it? Do you see why they're kind of fighting back? On, as in, like, if you were to, is there an argument to be taken from their side? Like, can you understand, or is there even to understand why they're not seeing this kind of people are talking about the theft and why it's people think it's normal or it's normalized?
Well, I think a lot of people are kind of misinterpreting the difference between inputting data and inspiration, right?
Mhm.
Like I've explained this a couple of times, but when humans are inspired, we look at an image, we retain some of the information, and then we use our previous experiences from our past life to fill in the gaps and to make something, right? So let's say, for example, I looked at a Picasso for like an hour, and then I walked away, and you told me to paint a Picasso. It wouldn't be a one-for-one Picasso, right? It would maybe look inspired by a Picasso, but then I would have all my other sensibilities to fill in the gaps. Whereas if you were to, show, like ask an AI image generator to generate something from Picasso, it would draw directly from the data, like one for one, plus mixed in with other information according to your prompts. And like I've read some statements coming from AI tech specialists on Discord, basically saying that sometimes the generative output isn't an output that's inspired by the input. It is it is literally the input, but just denoised and then renoised into a different configuration. But it is still data that was inputted into it.
And I think you've posted a couple examples where it's exactly like that. You can kind of tell it's a 1-to-1 or mirrored flip. Or for anyone curious, I think you can see. And those are, I suppose, they become blatant examples of what actually is happening. Maybe on everything else, maybe on smaller scale and more diffused. But that is an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, and what's also interesting is that there's also AI technology that's being built to combat AI art, right? So it's like using AI to fight AI. where these technologies are basically developed to break down generatives to track down the source data.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a reverse image Google search, but for AI, which is also being developed.
The crazy online AI battle is about to ensue, or already has. I guess it maybe kind of at the same time we're seeing the writing AI is happening, and then there's like AI created to find out if it's been written through AI.
Yeah, like that. I forgot where this kid was from. I think was he from MIT or something? I'm not sure, but it was he was a kid who I think was probably getting tired of seeing his classmates submit, Chat GPT essays, and he was like, you know what, I'm going to stop this right now.
I'm glad there's people who are that smart that can just if they will it, they make it happen.
Oh, yeah, for sure, amazing. Man. This is what happens when you have tech specialists who are also concerned about ethics, right?
Yeah. I'm very thankful for those people. ArtStation recently sent an email where it feels like, an email from a month ago looked quite different from what they're doing now.
Yes.
So as we're discussing, AI art and ArtStation being, at a certain point after, I guess, CG Society, I can't remember, after a couple of websites, they've become the one, they kind of become the main space. I feel like maybe after DeviantArt, I'm not sure the presence about it.
CG Hub went down.
Yeah, CG Hub, that's right. So they became the main presence. I mean, one of the bigger platforms online for digital artists, especially artists in the entertainment industry. And maybe we can chat about this as well. I don't know if you want to catch people up, because I know you're pretty active. You're paying attention to how their first response and what happened since. I don't know if you want to talk about that as well.
I can't remember their first TOS. There's been so much information since then, but I just know that they were using some kind of no AI tag, which didn't work to help, quote unquote, protect artists. But, a lot of artists started protesting against ArtStation because the marketplace was filled with AI assets being sold, and oddly licensed, unlicensed assets, but with licensed characters, right? Like we saw 200 Batman AI generatives being sold for $2.99, and then the Avatar ones, just a whole bunch of crazy stuff. And all of us were alerting ArtStation, being basically, you guys have a lot of bootleg assets being sold on your marketplace. You need to stop this. What's your stance on AI? And again, I can't quote Tim Sweeney or ArtStation specifically, but it just seemed like what they were saying was very obtuse and kind of it just sounded like they weren't really against AI at all. But then on their own terms of service, where they were talking about their own mega scans and some of their own assets and metahumans, they were very against AI machine learning, learning off of their own property, right? So we just thought that was very hypocritical, and we called that out. And we were hoping that they would have a terms of service update or some kind of change or something from Tim Sweeney to address these issues. But, nothing happened. A whole bunch of bootleg assets were still being sold in the marketplace. But then a couple of days ago, after the lawsuit was announced from the Joseph Saveri law firm, with the defendants Midjourney, Stability AI, and DeviantArt, after that got announced, I saw that Tim Sweeney actually retweeted my tweet.
Oh, wow.
And was commenting on it directly, and was basically saying that he was not aware of what was happening on ArtStation. Yep, sure. And that he was going to update his terms of service. So, that raised a lot of eyebrows. Call it what you will. And now here we are with this updated terms of service here, where he's basically saying no to AI and no to generative assets being sold on the marketplace.
Yeah, right? I guess for those, if you are subscribed or if you have an account, I mean, I have the thing in front of me, but it's says, we've updated our terms of service to make clear that scraping and reselling or redistributing content is not permitted, and to clarify the prohibition against the use of no AI content with generative AI programs. And then it says, let's see, we have also committed not to use or license any third party to use any ArtStation content for the purpose of training generative AI programs. And that's been from the start. I think one of the big things people are asking for is that this is free money for anyone out there who's going to use AI, right? Like, this is free content to scrape from. And actually, yeah, doesn't make you feel like the fact that you're seeing this response and everything else, and maybe it's kind of the cynic in me, but it's basically, unless someone's money is affected, they're not going to do anything about it. And now, well, you're seeing action potentially because just, now the business is in danger or something like that.
I know, like, it is such a cynical thing. And, I think a lot of us were really hoping that, if we came together and we're just, nice about it and, kind of address the issues publicly, that things would change. And they didn't, and nobody was listening to us, and a lot of people were gaslighting us, and especially on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is terrible for this. But as soon as the lawsuit got announced, that's all of a sudden when, for some reason, it legitimized our concerns. It's like, oh, maybe these artists have a point, and then everybody started taking a step back. And the thing is, once you look into who the law firm is, the Joseph Zuri law firm, you'll see that they're the same law firm that is involved with the GitHub lawsuit, and that they've previously won over $4 billion in rewards and settlements. So these guys are no joke, right? And I think once people realize that, they're like, okay, well, if artists really didn't have any case at all, then why is this law firm worth over $4 billion taking on this case, right? When you put two and two together, you're like, oh shit, maybe we need to rethink our terms of service and start backtracking this a little.
There's I've heard before, maybe it's like an argument to be said that anything that has been online has already been potentially used or stored or saved for this scraping. So seeing this message come up from ArtStation, sorry, I'm not too versed in it, so I'm curious, like, when you see something where they say, okay, it can't be scraped anymore, are you reading, when you're reading it, since you've been kind of analyzing this stuff, are you seeing it as everything from now on, or because it's too late, or like, do you have because I don't have an understanding of like how they can actually prevent that? I don't know if you know.
So basically, once AI has been trained with something, it can't be untrained. It's there for good, right? And there's been a lot of argument back and forth on how information is being stored. People are like, oh, there's no official server, so the information is not retained, right? And it's a little bit of a mystery right now, but like, I might be incorrect, but from what I've been reading, there's something called latent space, right? I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's basically like a little black box where all the diffusion and data points are at, including all the trained data. Sorry, my cat's jumping on me. And basically, this is where images get broken down into noise, into diffusion, and then get, reassembled into the generative image, right? And the argument is that this latent space where these images are floating around retain information, right? And somebody has recently done a test where they just typed in as a prompt Mona Lisa, and it would generate all different types of Mona Lisas, right? And they were all different, but they all basically looked very close to the original Mona Lisa, which is still in the latent space black box, right? So the thing is, there's no way to untrain this information. So even say that you take off artist's name out of the AI generation programs, like you take a Greg Rukowski's name, it doesn't matter because it's already been trained on it. So you have to reset the data sets or reset and start over again with ethical data, being like, public domain images, stock-free images, royalty-free images, or images where artists have opted their own art by choice and consent.
I wonder how likely this is going to be. I mean, it is an interesting world where when you imagine what ethical AI for the visual space looks like in the future, how are you seeing it? Are you seeing it as it's almost like people are selling their artwork to be used in the main database, or do you see them getting royalties because someone pulls it? I know this is like, it's all about to potentially be made, hopefully if we're lucky, right, is going to be made in a certain way past this lawsuit to maybe allow a little bit more like credibility, a little bit less theft. But how do you imagine it working, like in a perfect best case scenario?
There are definitely a couple of different ways. The first one would be something akin to like the Spotify formula, where basically every time your name or your images are used in a generative, you get a royalty of some kind, right? And that would definitely have to be a higher percentage than the Spotify percentage, because from what I've researched, it's that you get 0.04% off of a million streams for a musician, right? And if you break that down, that's about $4,300 for a million streams, which is insane, right? And if you have those same percentages for an artist, you will starve, because there's no way anyone is downloading or clicking our images a million times, right? Like none of us are Lady Gaga, unfortunately. So it would have to be a much higher percentage, right? And since it's our own images, I would only settle for like 80% or higher, right? Like that's just me being like vicious, but also like just advocating for us. And the other model would be companies allowing people to opt in their own art to train off of to create like generatives, variations of an asset, right? Like let's say if you wanted to create 30 different types of a special potion, a blizzard style potion, right, off of like Ilya's style, right? Then you would like draw a couple of those, paint them, and then maybe you type in, oh, like I want like a poison variation, I want like a dark magic variation, right? And that would be your own art that's trained. So that might be more ethical, right? And the other ones are, I can definitely see people like selling their body of work almost as like stock. Like maybe you sell a package of your stuff for like $20,000 to a company, and then they give you a percentage off of that, but they also give you an upfront, right? But I think we're gonna have to really be united on this as a community and figure out what ethical art looks like to us, right? Because for someone, their version of being ethical would be to sell their art for $20,000, and then to let the company run amok with their art in perpetuity, right? Whereas they would kind of screw everybody else over. So we need to get together and decide what is ethical for the community, not just the individual.
And would you say, like, when you think of kind of potential dangers here, are you seeing like the erasing of careers, lack of careers? Like, what, if you were to frame like what people should, like, why they should take it seriously and worry about it, how would you put that?
I would say this totally has the potential to eradicate the industry if left unregulated and unchecked, and it also has the potential to destroy a lot of other industries outside of entertainment and art. It can destroy chefs, YouTube content makers. It can destroy lawyers, writers, reporters, right? And we already started seeing the potential of deep fakes. The last thing we want is this technology getting into the political realm and start spreading like false propaganda and start influencing elections based on the propaganda. And the last thing we also want to see is journalism and articles being released that have a bias, right? Like obviously every article we read is biased right now, but all data collected from the internet is all based on human bias, right? Like if we looked at this program that got released called Lensa, you've probably heard of it, right?
Actually, I haven't. Actually, no, maybe I might. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
So basically, it's this program that turns your picture, like your profile pictures, into like art version, stylized version of your profile picture, right? It's been found that people have been, especially women, have started getting images back of them with large breasts or sexualized in some way, even though they just inputted their faces, right? And all of this data, all of these generative information is coming from the Lion 5B database, which is where Stable Diffusion is drawing their data from, right? And since it's collecting straight from the internet without curation, it also inherits the bias of people who post on the internet, right? So, like, just say, for example, you type in the word Asian, you wouldn't get, just like a person like me or like an Asian person walking down the street, you would get lots of like pornography, like Japanese pornography, because that is the bias of the internet. And that is what it spits out when you use programs that are monetizing off of this information that's uncurated. Because I don't know if you're aware, but this information was only it was designed to be for research only. Stability AI got $101 million in seed funding to develop this as a research project, but then through questionable methods of data laundering, it got out there, got commercialized, and now we're seeing people generating images that are coming back with very questionable content. There was also an article published by Wired magazine, I can link to you later, but this girl, basically Lensa is not supposed to be able to generate pictures of children, right? It's not supposed to be able to do that. But this woman typed in some prompts and was able to generate like nude child images, right? And it's also been found like a lot of people have started to create their own child, stuff.
Of course, the internet. Why?
Yeah, the internet will do what the internet does, but again, this is the danger of monetizing information that has not been curated because it's unfiltered, it's biased, and it's troubling.
And I guess like a very accelerated echo chamber, or like millions of echo chambers, like within this, like, and I guess certain like dark spaces. And maybe just to draw, like, to wrap this point up, the connection you make to whether it's like deepfakes or whether you're talking about articles being written, and why you're saying why this kind of fight is important, is it because you're thinking this will make a stance and make all the other potential like avenues of AI use illegal through that, or is it going to set up a precedent? I'm just trying to see the connection of using AI art and using images from other people and scraping it versus like articles, for example. Where do you see the connection there, and how that can snowball?
I think they're all connected, and I think that unfortunately, art is the first line of defense in this whole argument. If courts don't regulate this kind of technology, it's going to cascade and it's going to affect like everything we just talked about, like news, other industries, journalism and all that. So we need to like regulate. We need to regulate this technology, in our favor to set up future laws, because this is a universal global issue actually. And right now, like a lot of the copyright issues that we're seeing with this. Sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought here. But basically, the program Lensa that kind of blew this whole thing open is kind of making people aware of where this technology is headed if left unregulated.
And actually, the more you talk about it, the more scary it gets. And I think it's interesting how it can be very under the radar for an average person.
This is why I feel it's so important to talk about this, because it's not just an art problem, and a lot of people who aren't fully educated on this topic just write it off as it's a bunch of artists crying over stolen art, right? Yes, we are complaining about stolen art and it is affecting our industry, but it's also going to affect their jobs. And if you listen to the discussion that Proco had on YouTube with another AI specialist, I think his name was Evan. Basically, a lot of AI specialists will drop the word utopia. I don't know if you've heard this term before, but basically they are hoping that AI will automate all of our jobs so that we can go on and just not worry about capitalism and live as free humans in this free society known as a utopia, right? And they also mention UBI, like universal basic income, a lot.
Yeah.
Right. And like they're saying, like, we need to implement AI in everything so that everybody can have universal basic income and be happy, right? So that's their point of view, which is somewhat altruistic, but just ultimately flawed, right? Because no government is set up to handle massive UBI at the rate that this technology is advancing.
Yeah, and I suppose there's countries doing it, but it's like, I think capitalism is not meant to do that, and Bezos is not going to start sharing his income all of a sudden. So the unfortunate reality of this like unhinged capitalism, which is a whole other conversation, is it's not set up for like, because it's like that dream basically.
No, and like to me, it doesn't sound like utopia when the CEOs of these AI generation companies will be pocketing billions of dollars, right? That to me is not a utopia. That is just blind capitalism where everybody loses except a couple people at the top, right? So, it's just very confusing to me how a lot of people are buying into this utopia UBI talking point. Because to me, I don't think a lot of governments are ready to handle UBI, and I don't think a lot of governments are ready to handle massive unemployment, homelessness, and all this other stuff.
Especially when when basic issues can't be handled by certain variety of governments, countries, like that's too big of a thing to handle. If sometimes let's bring up Vancouver homelessness. I don't know if you want to name it, or LA. It's like if those things can't be figured out, good luck with anything else beyond this.
That's what I'm saying, dude. Like, just look around, right? Look at Vancouver. Look at East Hastings. Look at Skid Row in LA, and look at a lot of parts in New York City, Chinatown. If our governments can't even put their heads together to solve the homeless issue we have right now, imagine that times 7 billion.
Yeah.
Right. We are not ready to automate. We have to make sure everyone is employed so that they can live and continue contributing to society.
All the sci-fi books you read are true. Blade Runner is a real thing.
I know, dude. I love Blade Runner. I've always wanted to be in that world, but not now.
Not like that.
Not like this. Not like this.
Yeah.
No.
I was going to a Harry Potter world instead. I'm curious if you. One thing I was wondering, and I've only started looking at it a little bit in the photographer realm, because the stock photos, that's always been a thing, a little bit more regulated, I suppose, than, because I guess it creates revenue streams. So most photography websites you go on, there's a section where you can buy these photos, and there's a section which these artists own their photos, and you could also buy them if you wanted to. So that space felt like it had a little bit more maybe safeguards in place. Do you know much about that? Because technically, you could be generating realistic images again as well by scraping any photography website. Has there been? I'm hoping that you have your kind of radar on everything, but I don't know if you've seen anything in that world.
I mean, I'm not too familiar with the photography scene, but there was the Getty lawsuit that was announced just the day after ours, I think, a day or two.
Oh, nice.
Oh, were you not aware of that?
No, that's very reassuring.
Okay. Let's just go and Google it in real time. Just look up let's find out. Getty image lawsuit.
I'm very glad I'm talking to you. I got to do more research.
It's okay, dude. It's so much information. It's so much.
Oh yeah, Getty Images suing creators of AI art tool Stable Diffusion.
Yep. So it's one of the same defendants as the artists' defendants. Lawsuits. Stability AI, that's a big one, and it's the same. It draws from the same database, the Lion 5B database.
Do you see yourself using AI in the future?
I asked myself this too, because I'm a terrible background painter, and would I use this? Not in its current form, no. And ethically, I would rather, me personally, I would just hire some friends to paint, because I love working with people, and I love seeing people paint things that draw from their experiences and something that I can't prompt or imagine myself. And also, I just respect craftsmen, and I don't want to rip anybody off. That being said, I know that not everybody is an artist, and other people will want to pay $30 a month to generate 300 images or whatever, and they'll continue to do that unless regulated and checked.
And even if it is regulated, someone who has spent years learning how to make artwork, does it defeat the purpose for you or no? As in, let's say it's regulated and you pay a membership on some website, and now you can make backgrounds for your comic book that you dream about. And otherwise, if you had to do it on your own, it'll take you 5 years, but maybe you could bring that down to 1 year, and ultimately you end up telling a story that you love, which is maybe your final goal. Do you see that as a realistic scenario, or does it kind of kill something within that process for you?
I think it kind of kills something for me. I would probably just try to do the backgrounds myself, to be honest, just so I learn more as a craftsman.
Yeah.
But it's a different motivation for me. It's do you want to get the thing done, or do you want to get the thing done and learn something, right? And it really, to me, it's such a tricky question, because it's what does ethical AI look like, right? And depending on how you answer that question, it could be a yes or no if I would use it or not. I think if it was a world where I learned how to paint some backgrounds, and then I fed it into a machine to replicate my style, but for other backgrounds, then maybe, right? But if it were to replicate your style or another background artist style or environmental artist style without their consent, then I absolutely would not use it.
Yeah. I feel like I often have these questions, and I think a lot of artists likely do, the separation of career versus personal development versus personal satisfaction, growth, meaning, pursuit, again, versus making money. And there's nothing wrong with making money. We all need it. And sometimes those reasons, even how we started this podcast, right? Talking about putting artwork on Instagram to get a job, or putting artwork on Instagram because you made a painting of an apple, you know, the versus, as in, sorry, I meant like for personal reasons. And those always exist. And I feel like what this is going to create, even if, and I'm hoping that the situation clears out, but this is going to force more of this question for people to make a clear separation potentially for career or money making versus art making or personal growth, because it is now, you know, it now opens the door to creating without going through the hard work of either getting good or gaining knowledge. And one thing I wanted to ask you at the start, actually, but we can do it now, is for people going to art school right now, for students potentially about to embrace for a 6-year education to, you know, become a concept artist, storyboard artist, or, you know, we're talking about people writing essays and clicking a button, you know, it opens this door that didn't exist, you know, like you could have hired, you know, paid your classmate to make homework for you. It's kind of basically equivalent of that, but now it's a lot easier to do so. What would you, like, I don't know, maybe imagine yourself in that situation. Like, what would you want to hear?
This, I actually get asked, totally. This is such a great question because I know personally that, like, art leads and art directors are still looking to hire people that can draw, because those people need to be able to take specific direction, make decisions on the fly. Right, and let's say, for example, to get more specific, let's say you're an AI prompter, right, and somehow you land a job in a concept art, in a game industry, right, and then you have to do some concept art. Let's say your task is to design, a quote unquote badass woman on a yellow motorcycle with a samurai sword, right? Mm-hmm. You generate that image. But then all of a sudden you have to do specific tweaks, like, oh, you know what? I love the face. Keep the face. I love the motorcycle, but make her arm a mechanical arm. Change the nose. Instead of a samurai sword, give her like a 15th century medieval sword, and then turn the motorcycle wheel this way, right? Mm-hmm. And then what will end up happening is that person will generate those things with the new nose, but it'll be an entirely new image, right? And then the art director will be like, okay, but I wanted the last thing just with these couple tweaks, right? So, I mean, I've even heard there's another art director on Twitter, I forgot his name right now, but he said that his job has become harder. Like, art directors' jobs and recruiters' jobs have become harder because they now have to sift through AI portfolios that are useless to them, right?
Yeah.
Because these people can't handle revisions or original designs on the fly, right? And also they're using images that are copyrighted. Right, and just say if we were to do an art book for the game, right? Now you have copyrighted art in your art book, which opens up the company to legal issues, right?
Yeah.
I will say this though, people have DM'd me who worked for smaller game companies, mobile game companies or indie game companies, and a lot of these guys they are using unethical AI to do concept art, right? Because they don't think they're going to be caught. But it doesn't change the fact that, the laws are still catching up with the technology. And right now we're having a lot more conversations on what is legal, what's legal, what's not legal, what's ethical, what's not ethical. But I feel like the growing conversation in the public eye is kind of gearing towards more our point of view, because now they're starting to see where this data came from, how it was taken without consent, and how it's being monetized, right? And I think if a lot of these smaller game companies start releasing products with stolen art, and the lawsuit settles the way it's going to settle, they could potentially get into a lot of problems, and they need to be thinking about the long term rather than the short term. So I will feel like, for a lot of art hopefuls out there, keep doing art, keep doing it because you love it. There's still a place for you in the industry, and art directors and recruiters are actively looking for people who are still skilled and talented. And don't forget, if we are ever in a place where we're implementing AI ethically in the industry, we still need people that can draw, right? Yeah. Because a lot of AI prompters who are kind of pooping on artists and everything. They don't realize that, if we wanted to, we could pick this up and prompt in no time, right?
Yeah, for
We can
sure.
draw, we can do our jobs, and we can do everything they can do, but they can't do what we do, right? So
Yeah.
let's say like tomorrow, our art directors came in and were like, guys, AI is now ethical. So now we can start implementing AI in our pipelines, right?
Mm-hmm.
We would still be drawing, but we would also be prompting as well, right?
Mm-hmm. And you would have
So,
to draw. It's like it's what you're saying, and something I was telling my coworkers is that everyone who's worked with the client know that sometimes you're going to turn the head 5%, change the hue 10%, and maybe have one
yes,
eye needs to be closed a little bit, and then the headphones in your head, are, the minute detail that need to be changed, as you mentioned earlier with your example of like that's something that's not going to go away. It's always going to be there, and you're going to have to be there to make those adjustments. So those jobs exist and will continue to do so. Yeah.
of course. Also, layers, layers are still a thing, right? Like, how often do you just like submit like just flatten everything you've ever done, and then not worry about notes, right? Like, no, no. Our artists see. This is what I'm saying. Like, this is like the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? People think art is easy when they don't know anything about art, right? The more you know about something, the more you know you don't know,
Yeah.
right? It's like if I said I wanted to learn how to skateboard today, and I got on a skateboard and maybe I can roll down the sidewalk, I'd be like, oh my god, skateboarding is easy, right? But then, like, if you look at someone like Tony Hawk who did like the 900, he's been skateboarding for what, 20, 30 years. He'll tell you it's hard as shit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And actually, one thing I was wondering: do you find do you find that storyboarding is a little bit safer from all this, even if when it becomes if AI becomes implemented? To me, it feels like because storyboarding is such raw, like it's raw ideas. Sometimes they don't even have to be drawn the best way, and like some amazing storyboard artists I know, they just scribble. But the point is not that. The point is to convey, as you're saying, composition, emotion, feel. There's so much, but it's done and often in such a crude way that to me it feels like such a human, like it's a very very human thing to get it right. And so much of it is feeling and pacing, and imagining lenses. Do you feel like that is always in some ways going to be safe or sacred?
I firmly believe that nothing is sacred at this current point, but I will say that I do feel like, oh, fuck, I don't want to like jinx myself here, but I feel like storyboarding is a little bit safer, especially if you can draw faster than people can prompt, right? Right? Think about this. Like, if you look at the storyboard for what's that movie? Parasite. The storyboards are like, they're very crude, but the blocking is amazing, right? And the different compositions and the storytelling they have, and like you can draw down people sitting in a certain way faster than someone can be like, okay, 5 people in a Chinese restaurant inspired by Martin Scorsese with a 55 millimeter lens, and then there's a reverse shot of an over the shoulder Roger Deakins. You know what I mean? By that time, I've already drawn it and moved on to the next frame. So,
Yeah.
and like drawing is very specific. It might not look always beautiful, but if you can nail down the idea fast, then it wins, right? Like, same thing when I was storyboarding in Blizzard. There was a time where I was like very obsessed with like making this thing look amazing, right? And then some of my teammates would just draw something that was more crude but had better composition, and then they would win, right?
Yeah.
It's best idea wins. And like, if rendering an image allows you to sell your idea, then the valid, right? It's valid. But if what you're selling is composition, lenses, character motivation, or character state of mind with crude drawings, you win.
Yeah.
So it's all about intent.
It's all very good to hear.
Yep.
Yeah.
Storyboarding, everybody, just get into it.
I mean, even if you're not going to storyboard, you should get into it if you're a visual artist. I think
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
kind of what you're describing about comic books is the same thing in storyboards. It forces you to think about that intent. In some ways, it's like just another kind of gym weightlifting for artists, like live drawing is. It may not hurt to do that.
That's a good analogy or metaphor, like gym training.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna have to wrap this up in a little bit, just because I think we're I think 1 hour I found is usually good size podcast for people to digest. What are you most excited about these days in the art world? What comes to mind?
I just love storytelling. I never, not to beat a dead horse, but I love storyboarding. I never get sick of it. There are always new stories to tell. There are always new ways to tell it, and there's always ways to learn more about writing. Writing, directing, and I'm looking forward to the day where I can direct and lead a team and just learn as much from them as they learn from me, hopefully, and just like help guide a team of extraordinary artists to go towards one amazing vision. I'm just excited about community all the time, and to me, art is about the people, and that's what excites me the most.
100%. And it sounds like well, my sense of it, although it's kind of seeing your work and hearing your name pop up, I feel like you must not be too far from achieving that dream. I think a lot of people like your work. Seems like a lot of people trust you, and people who worked with you really like that experience. So I hope you're on the right track. I can't wait to see what that looks like.
Me too. I hope I'm on the right track too, man. Like, who knows? I'll let you know in a couple of years. So
sounds good. I think I'm gonna have to. I'll try to through you. I guess I'm gonna have to keep paying attention to this saga and where the courts are going. I feel like I'm seeing, as you're mentioning at the start, I'm seeing more people, more artists being vocal about it, but also being involved. I hope we can get more resolution for it. And I don't know. I feel like maybe this is something that I would love to even catch up maybe in a couple of months. Maybe it'll be worth doing another episode on this, because I feel like it certainly feels like it's only starting and only developing. Even the fact that like you and I just got this email from ArtStation like less than a day ago, I imagine there's going to be more companies following that lead, especially when it's like ArtStation is owned by Epic, right? And so I'm assuming that's a big turn for that whole entity.
For sure. I mean, like this thing is always evolving every day, which is why it's so hard for me to just like focus, because like there's so much new information that's constantly coming out and new viewpoints from different companies. I will say that on the art side of things, Spectrum Fantasy magazine has come out and basically said we're going to support artists. We're not going to do any AI. We're going to stick with real paintings from now on. Kickstarter has come out with a statement recently because they turned down a campaign called Unstable Diffusion. You've probably heard of that.
Mm-hmm.
What else? Man, there's been so many. My brain's kind of racking right now.
It's okay. We'll tell people to go to your like LinkedIn and Instagram, and they'll find more information.
Yeah. There's lots
definitely
more.
A lot to keep up with. I'm just gonna have a couple more questions for you, and we can usually try to leave them for the end. What artists must everyone know about?
Oh my God. Fucking hell. Okay, I hope this counts. Like Satoshi Kon, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Director of Paprika, Perfect Blue.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was an animator or storyboard artist on Magnetic Rose for Memories. Like, I highly recommend everyone check out the anime anthology called Memories from 1995. It's phenomenal. Other artists you need to follow. God. Well, Greg Rutkowski. Who's been getting the short end of the stick on this one, but
poor guy,
poor guy. But dude, his art's phenomenal, freaking phenomenal.
I mean, he's iconic. I think his work is iconic. That's why it has been so sought out in the AI prompt land.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I'll just say, Greg Rutkowski, Sam Yang, Carlo Ortiz, Sarah Anderson, Kelly McCarran. Man, who else? Well, who are some of your favorite artists right now?
You had to throw it back at me. Usually, yeah, I understand why that is such a difficult question. I still the graphic sense and the color use and overall compositions of Alberto Mielgo, I think, generally stand out. Every once in a while, I try to make a folder of just like simplify it down to, let's say, 10, 20 artworks that feel like the direction I want to pursue, and I think generally he pops up in there, man. And there's quite a bit. I not very good with names. I'm gonna try to see if I can find. There's an illustrator that I've been really liking recently. Anyways, maybe it may take too long. Although I feel like these names should be on the top of my head, shouldn't they? Yeah, but there's a lot of. I'm trying to figure out. I feel like usually lately, trying to find a way where I can, like, the exposure to art that I have, I can try to not limit it, but maybe direct it a little bit more so that I know where I'm gonna head. Because I find sometimes it is after seeing so much cool artwork, it's almost like too easy to get lost in the noise of it.
Totally, dude.
Yeah, and then you're like, I don't even know where. Well, out of all the things that I've seen and I love, and I don't know if you have that, but I kind of get distracted by so much cool art and variety that can be taken that it's harder to actually then figure out what you're going to sit down and draw because so many things are enticing.
For sure. I mean, like this goes back to the whole inspiration conversation again, right? But it's like you have to like have an idea of where you want your career to go and what kind of projects you want to work on. And you could always draw from a couple artists for inspiration. I use that word inspiration to kind of gear your art style to, right? And like I remember like, one day I would be like, oh, I really love the way Chris Copeland draws this, but I also really love the way that Ashley Wood draws this, right? Yeah. And then you end up just drawing different styles on different days, and you're like, who am I? Like, who am I as an artist, right? So it's like, just gotta sit down, like figure out what kind of projects or movies or styles speak to you as an artist and as a person, and what you can relate to as well, right? And then like you said, pick 4 or 5 and.
But that separation for myself, I don't know about you, that separation for myself is tricky of being like, here's all the cool things that I love, and then here's what I love to do, and I think they're so connected, but you can't help but be influenced. But I wonder how much of that influence should be allowed in, and then or how much it should be influenced by your personal life, because in the end, nothing is more unique to you than your personal life. But you're not seeing dinosaurs around you every day, so like, so what is that supposed to look like if you're gonna make a painting that's as close and as uniquely to yourself? I mean, maybe it's a painting of your room because nobody else has that room like you do, and you don't see the same way you do. And I'm just curious how to translate that into, okay, here's a skeleton, but how is it that I show it through myself? And I think on the topic of AI and things being replicated and meshed, I think the ability to be unique in your own way is more and more valuable every day. I think it generally is. You want to try to get good enough and practice and copy and study until you can be yourself, right? I hope that's for a lot of artists, that's where that path is, because I think that personal taste and reflection and interpretation is what makes your artwork different and unique and appealing compared to another person, right?
Oh, for sure.
So it's a preamble of like where I want to go with it. The artist I was just mentioning, the illustrator I've really been admiring is Ji-Hoon Lee. I hope I'm saying it correctly. It's a person from South Korea. They've done some artwork for Dota, I think, and a couple other ones, but it's really beautiful. I'll drop a couple of links. I'll try to get some links from our conversation in the chat, but something about their form and the way they're executing is really awesome. And then a couple more that come to mind right now is Zoer and Matt Velvet. They're
I don't think I know them.
They're street artists. They do murals and fine art, but they're again, I think maybe I am drawn to more kind of solid shapes and graphic designs represented through like paintings and landscapes. I'll send you some links. They're super. Yeah,
please do.
Impressed every time. Okay, and last question for you: what advice would you have for your younger self before you went to university? So before you went to OCAD.
Don't go to OCAD. I'm like joking, but I'm also not. Let's see, advice
for people who are going to OCAD right now. Why? You should probably explain. Otherwise, you're going to be pretty sad.
Okay. Well, I don't want to get sued for defamation or anything, but I'll just say that before you go to an art school, the most important thing to do is to look at employment rates from schools, right? And if you talk to people from Sheridan, I would say 90% of them are employable, and 90% of them have been employed to some varying degree. And a lot of my favorite artists on Instagram, I ended up finding out that they were from Sheridan. It was completely like by coincidence, right? I mean, there are some phenomenal artists that have come out of OCAD and other art schools too, but it usually takes a bit more like suffering in order to get there. Emily Carr. I think Jeff Simpson came out of Emily Carr.
Yeah.
right? And you just know that he's someone who's just like busted his ass and is just
Fair.
like gone through the ringer to get to the level he has. And like, I guess to some degree, it kind of does matter what school you go to because you want to be around the right vibe and the right
Hmm.
environment that will like prepare you for the kind of pressures and stuff you have to be prepared for.
Yeah.
So I would say, yeah, just look at success rates for
Yeah,
sure.
that's it. That's really good advice. Jeff was on a podcast, and I would say, and maybe I've mentioned it before, people who come out of Emily Carr and are able to get a job in the industry, it's not because of Emily Carr.
No,
It's because, and maybe again, I shouldn't throw so much hate at Emily Carr. It's just like they may educate in various fields really well, but concept art and entertainment field yet. I don't think it's maybe to a level of Sheridan. And so all that is to say is not to knock the school, but rather to give compliment to the artists who are able to come out of that school and get those jobs. That just means they worked so much harder than likely your average person.
that's actually such a great point that I wanted to touch on too. Is that the art school that I went to that will not be named, basically, they were very against comic book art, concept art, storyboarding. They were very against all forms of entertainment art, right?
Wow.
And at the time, they were like very much preaching, a career in editorial illustration, right? Like we're talking about covers for magazines that are defunct.
What
out of
happened to
print, right?
that industry?
Well, look at AI. That's what happened to it. Yeah, I mean, like, you need to be going to. Okay, here's the advice I would give to myself. Look at statistics for schools, but also ask your instructors if they are still currently in the field, if they are currently still in the industry, and that is so important. You want to be going to a school where the instructors are very busy. This is only their side gig, and they're too busy, killing it in the industry, right?
Yeah.
Because I remember when I took a video game design class, like our class where you kind of learn to make video games, we didn't really learn much. And then on the last day of the class before we all departed, I asked my instructor what game company he worked for. He said he's never been in the game industry, never worked on any games. He had a PhD in English, and he read a book on video games, and that's how he's teaching the course for video game design.
Man, that should be illegal.
It should be illegal. And like when I found that out, that was the last day of that class, and I already had spent the whole semester designing this game based on things that this guy read out of a book.
Wow. Yeah. That is sad, especially knowing that how quickly the industry moves and the amount of changes, but also like the personal experiences that matter for anyone who's worked at any art job. You know that and not to say that things are not useful you get in school, but the direct information and lessons that you discover through working are incredible. Yeah, that's really good. Thanks, man.
Oh, good.
Jon, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for doing what you're doing. Thanks for fighting the fight. I'm going to get myself further educated after this. I hope we get to chat about this again, and hopefully one day about more art things and where you're going to take your personal project. I still have a lot of questions about that. I'm curious about your career. You've been at a lot of studios, so there's certainly a lot more to touch upon. So hopefully we'll find a time, but otherwise for now, again, thanks so much. And do you want to let people know how they can find you?
Sure. And that being said, feel free to reach out anytime. This has been a lot of fun. Maybe we can grab coffee sometime or whatever.
Yeah, dude.
Okay, so people can reach me at Instagram, where I blab the most there. It's Jon Lam Art. Instagram.com/Jon Lam Art. And LinkedIn, also Jon Lam Art. So see me there. See me blab on Twitter as well. Same handle.
And for people who want to see your artwork, I did find your website, but I think it was an unexpected name.
Yes, it's droidbrush.carbonmade.com. That is a mouthful. That's mainly where I just put some stuff for like professional portfolios. It's mainly storyboards and some designs here and there. But yeah, definitely check it out as well.
It's worth looking into. For people listening, you should go there, and I'll put it on a link because so you're a great storyboard artist, but your character designs are amazing too. So it's no wonder that you're doing both. So much appeal and really great sense of shape. So for people listening, do check it out. Thanks again to Jon, and thanks so much for listening. Hopefully more on the topic coming up, and as always, really appreciate you checking this out. Have a good
Thanks
one.
so much. Same.